In a quaint town nestled between rolling hills and shimmering lakes, there lay a garden unlike any other. The garden was a burst of color, flowers of every hue swayed in the breeze, their scents mingling to create a perfume so enchanting that people from far and wide would travel just to experience it. But beyond its beauty, the garden held a secret known to only two people. Emma had lived in the town all her life. A shy, quiet girl, she preferred the company of books to people, and the garden had been her sanctuary since childhood. She would spend hours wandering its paths, lost in the pages of a novel, or simply sitting under the old oak tree, letting the world melt away. The garden was her refuge, a place where she felt understood, where the flowers seemed to bloom just for her. It was on one such afternoon that she met him. Alexander was a traveler, a man with a restless spirit. He had seen more of the world than most could dream of, yet he never stayed in one place for long. He was passing through the town when he heard of the garden, and his curiosity drew him there. As he walked through the entrance, the vibrant colors and sweet aromas washed over him, but it wasn't the garden that caught his eye. It was the girl sitting under the oak tree, her nose buried in a book. Emma didn't notice him at first. She was engrossed in her story, the world around her fading into the background. It wasn't until Alexander sat down beside her that she looked up, startled by the sudden presence. "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you," he said, his voice gentle. "I just couldn't resist the beauty of this place." Emma smiled shyly, closing her book. "It's my favorite place in the world," she confessed. "I come here every day." "Then you must know all its secrets," Alexander said, his eyes twinkling with curiosity. Emma shrugged. "It's just a garden," she replied, though she knew deep down that it was much more than that. They fell into easy conversation, talking about books, travels, and the little things that made life beautiful. Alexander was charming and kind, and Emma found herself opening up to him in a way she hadn't with anyone else. There was something about him that put her at ease, as if they had known each other for years. Days turned into weeks, and Alexander's stay in the town grew longer than he had planned. He and Emma spent every afternoon in the garden, exploring its nooks and crannies, discovering new flowers, and sharing stories. The more time they spent together, the more they realized how deeply they were falling for each other. But Alexander had always been a traveler, and he knew that one day, he would have to leave. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the garden, Alexander took Emma's hand. "I have to leave soon," he said, his voice tinged with sadness. Emma's heart sank, but she nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. "I knew this day would come," she whispered. "I don't want to go," Alexander said, his eyes locking with hers. "But I can't stay either. The world is too vast, and there's so much more I need to see." Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. "Then go," she said softly. "But promise me one thing." "Anything," Alexander replied. "Promise me that no matter where you go, you'll always come back to this garden," she said, her voice trembling. "It's where we met, and it's where I'll be, waiting for you." Alexander pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I promise," he murmured into her hair. "I'll always come back to you." They spent their last night together under the oak tree, watching the stars twinkle above. Neither of them spoke, content to simply be in each other's presence, savoring the moment before it slipped away. The next morning, Alexander left. Emma watched him go, her heart heavy but filled with hope. She knew he would return, but she didn't know when. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. Life went on, but Emma never stopped visiting the garden. Every day, she would sit under the oak tree, waiting for Alexander. She would read, write, and sometimes simply sit in silence, her thoughts filled with memories of him. The townsfolk began to notice, whispering about the girl who waited in the garden. Some pitied her, others thought her foolish, but Emma paid them no mind. She had faith in Alexander's promise, and that was all that mattered. Years passed, and Emma grew older, but her love for Alexander never faded. The garden remained as beautiful as ever, untouched by time, and every day, she would sit under the oak tree, her heart filled with the hope that today would be the day he returned. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, as the leaves turned golden and the air grew cool, Emma saw a figure walking through the garden's entrance. Her heart leaped in her chest as she recognized the man who had never truly left her thoughts. Alexander was older, his hair touched with gray, but his eyes still held the same warmth and kindness she remembered. He walked slowly, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing, until he reached the oak tree where Emma Saturday, "You waited for me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Emma stood, tears streaming down her cheeks as she nodded. "I told you I would," she whispered. Alexander reached out, taking her hands in his. "I traveled the world, saw wonders beyond imagination," he said softly. "But nothing compared to this, to you." Emma smiled through her tears. "And I kept this garden alive, waiting for you to come back." They embraced, the years melting away as if they had never been apart. In that moment, the world around them ceased to exist, there was only the garden and the love that had brought them back together. From that day on, Alexander never left Emma's side. They spent their days in the garden, tending to the flowers, sharing stories, and simply enjoying the life they had waited so long to have together. The garden, once a place of solace, became a symbol of their enduring love, a love that had withstood the test of time and distance. And as the years passed, it was said that the garden grew even more beautiful, the flowers blooming brighter and the air sweeter, as if the very earth itself was celebrating their reunion. And so, Emma and Alexander lived out their days in the garden, their love as timeless as the flowers that surrounded them. And when they were finally laid to rest,